This is a Dreamcast disc and is for use only on a Dreamcast unit. Playing this disc on a hi-fi or other audio equipment can cause serious damage to its speakers.
Dreamcast, up to 6 billion players.
Welcome back to the stage of history.
Why don't we play together?
Hey, it's time to make some crazy money. Are you ready? Here we go!
Please stop this disc now.
Hello and welcome to episode 106 of the Dreamcast Junkyard DreamPod. We have quite the show for you this time, as we have not one, but two very special guests. We'll be discussing gaming periodicals of the past and present and delving into the booming Dreamcast indie scene, as our guests are, quite simply, scholars in these respective fields. Oh, and they're combining their forces for a very exciting release for the Dreamcast in the near future. But first, before I introduce our guests formally, my co-host on this episode is fresh from the success of Lock On Issue 3. His name is Andrew Dickinson. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. All the better for hearing your voice. It's been a few episodes, hasn't it, since we were on the same podcast.
It has, yeah. Been busy,
yeah.
as you've alluded to, with Volume 003. All the Dreamcast stuff going on there, which is cool.
Yeah, and it's a great release, and it's been garnering some really positive reviews. So, congratulations on that. I don't know if you can. Is this a spoiler alert? Will there be an issue 4?
No, that's it. We've stopped. I've quit. No, yeah, there will be launching very, very soon. So just keep an eye out on at Lost in Cult, and we'll be announcing for really soon.
Excellent stuff. Okay. Less about us. Let's go back to our guests. Our first guest is essentially gaming magazine royalty. Obviously, you are as well, Andrew, but I think our first guest has got a bit more experience in this field, having helmed both SEGA Power and later Saturn Power magazines, which I read in my youth. He's now back in editor's throne with SEGA Powered magazine. Welcome, Dean Mortlock.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No, it's a great honour and a pleasure. As I alluded to in the intro and before we started talking, when I was gushing like a fanboy, I did read your words and laugh quite heartily at the reviews and all the different articles that you put out back in the day. Our second guest is a man who heads up possibly the most exciting publishing house in the Dreamcast scene, an outfit even, which has single-handedly revolutionised physical releases for the system right here in 2022. It's my great pleasure to welcome Daniel from Wave Game Studios. Welcome, Daniel.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Now, the reason we've asked both of you to appear on the DreamPod at the same time will become apparent a little later on. But first, I thought it would be a good idea to settle into this episode of the DreamPod and just go around the table a little bit to discuss some of the games we've been playing recently, either on the Dreamcast or otherwise. Obviously, we are aware that there are new Dreamcast games all around us, and you're partly responsible for those, Daniel. But we'll come back to those. I'm going to start with you, Andrew, just because I've not heard your voice in such a long time. No. And I was actually getting quite sort of is it like voice sick, like voice sickness, like homesick?
I don't think that's a thing, Tom, but we'll make it a thing. Let's pretend it's a thing. Yeah.
Let's pretend that's a thing. So, what have you been playing, Andrew?
I think I say this every time we do this. Not a whole lot. As a gamer who does head up a gaming publication. I don't play an awful lot of games just because I don't have the time, unfortunately. But I have managed to review a couple of games recently because I do some freelance work to help the money keep rolling in. So I've played 2 games recently. One of those being Final Vendetta, which Dreamcast lovers will hopefully will know is from Bitmap Bureau, who did the wonderful Xeno Crisis. And I also played a game called Ikai. I think that's how you pronounce it, Ikai. But to be honest, I don't really want to talk about that game because it's not very good. But Final Vendetta is very good. It's not out on Dreamcast yet. Hopefully, maybe one day they might. I don't know. We'll try to manifest that right here and now. Please, Bitmap Bureau, bring it to the Dreamcast. But it's on Switch and PlayStation 4 and all that kind of good stuff. And it's excellent. It's a Streets of Rage type game. Pixel art. It's really, really good. I don't know if you've managed to play any of it yet, Tom.
I certainly have, yes. I played it on both Switch and on PS5, and it's, as you say, it's an excellent game. fantastic. I've been on a bit of a kick of these sort of 2D side-scrolling beat-em-ups recently, which I'll talk about in a sec. But before I talk about what I've been playing, I'd like to throw it open to Daniel to see what he's been playing. So, Daniel, what have you been playing, Dreamcast or otherwise?
I've also been playing quite a bit of Final Vendetta, actually.
Nice.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I mean, I feel bad for saying the same title so quickly, but it really is pretty awesome, to be honest.
Yeah.
Those guys really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
In addition to that, I've been playing lots of Dreamcast indie stuff.
Naturally, yeah.
Some released, some not. Lots of testing going on, as you can imagine. So yeah, I've definitely been filling every spare minute with gaming, which is unusual for me.
And which Dreamcast games have you been playing that you can talk about?
Mostly Shadow games.
Okay.
What with the imminent release of that particular title, I have to say it's pretty great, but I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that.
Oh yes,
later on.
We will, 100%. Excellent. Okay, cool. And I was going to say last but not least, but I've not spoken yet. But Dean, what have you been playing? Enlighten us, please.
A bit like Andrew, really. It's a case of, ironically, when you work on a games magazine, you don't tend to have an awful lot of time to actually play any games.
Yeah, it's true.
So
it's sadly true, isn't it?
It really is. It really is, especially because we're coming up to deadline now for issue 5, and so it's kind of not 24/7, but it's all hands to the pump, and it has been like that for about a week now. So, but I have tried to squeeze in as much as possible. I've been playing a lot of MSR, which is something we're covering in issue 5. Which is something I loved at the time, and I haven't played for a good number of years, and so it's been quite nice to come back to that. And I've been playing a range of independent stuff, which is linked to what we're going to be talking about in a bit. Shadow games I've played quite a bit of, which is really, really good fun. If you like stuff like Final Vendetta, then you're really, really going to like Shadow games. It's tough, but it's a really, really good fun game. And a couple of Switch games, really, just a couple of slightly older ones, things like Cuphead. I'm still battling my way through that. L.A. Noire, I picked that up recently, so I've been having a go on that again because I've never played it on Switch. Yeah, so that's kind of it, really.
Wow, nice mix, yeah, and very much leaning towards the old, like I said, the old 2D side-scrolling beat-em-ups. As I alluded to earlier, I've been playing Final Vendetta as well. Again, an amazing game. Also played a bit of Shadow Gangs on the Dreamcast. I am terrible at it. I'm terrible at most games, so I have to put it on easy mode to get anywhere. But I did play the demo several months ago when that was released, and I thought it was really good then. So to have the final full game as a digital backer now is great. I know that Daniel Wave is involved in the publication of the full and final physical version, but again, we'll talk about that shortly. To be honest, I'm one of them people who plays a lot of games, but in very short bursts and then jumps around a lot. So I've been playing a lot of stuff. So I've been playing Red Out 2, which is a futuristic racing game that came out last week at the time of recording. A game called Chorus, which is a space sort of opera shoot 'em up on Game Pass. Gran Turismo 5, been playing a bit of that. Astrobot, the new Turtles game, is it Revenge of Shredder? Sort of 2D beat 'em up. That's a great game. But I'm loving the sort of return to these side-scrolling beat 'em ups, because there was a period where they just kind of disappeared and there just weren't any. Recently, I think with the release of Streets of Rage 4, maybe that's kind of what kicked it all off, and they've all started coming back out. Because there was that other one, there was that Paprium that came out on the Mega Drive. Didn't you? You've got that, haven't you, Andrew?
I have, yeah. I've got that. It's I feel like Final Vendetta is much better than it. But yeah. Oh, and just to correct you there, because just before James kind of murders you, it's Gran Turismo 7 that you've been playing rather than 5, right? Yeah,
it's Gran Turismo 7. Sorry, yeah, it's the one on the PS5. I think that's where I've got my numbers mixed up. PS5.
Yeah, I just know that James will have you for giving the rock hits. He loves Gran Turismo 7, so.
To be honest, Gran Turismo 5 is probably a better game, but that's controversial. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, before people start throwing their iPods at the wall, now we've discussed all that, let's turn our attention to interrogating our guests, and I mean that in the nicest possible sense. We're not going to waterboard you or anything, gentlemen.
Mike's
so don't
not
worry
here.
about
that.
It's fine. So I'm going to come to you first, Dean. We've mentioned it in passing already, your credentials, but I wondered if you might go into a little bit more detail on your past endeavours, really, how you got involved in magazines, how your path led up all the way to the present day with SEGA Powered, really. I know it's a big question, but if you could maybe just give us a sort of potted history of sort of who you are and what you've done in the past, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. Right, very quickly. I used to run a bar in Somerset, in Frome, in Somerset. I went to a job centre in Trowbridge, saw a job for a staff writer on a magazine. I applied and got it. That was for a magazine called Console Access, which was the first sort of all-in-one tips mag. That was from Paragon. I stayed there for about 4 or 5 months, and then Future rang me up and asked me if I wanted to go and get a job on SEGA Power. So then I started on that mag. So obviously I jumped at the opportunity. I stayed there literally until the end. So I started as staff writer, worked up to editor, and then saw the relaunch of Saturn Power, which the whole USP of Saturn Power was the fact that it was going to come with a disc every issue. So when I pitched the idea of Saturn Power, the publisher said, okay, well, you could do that, but you need to come to me with a whole year's worth of discs booked in and ready to go. And then I'll say yes. So that's what I did. I actually had 12 publishers that said, yeah, we'll do a disc for that issue and that issue. We had them all booked in. So we started the magazine running. And then, as you know, the death of the Saturn was very quick and quite brutal. So what tended to happen was a lot of the third-party releases were cancelled immediately, very quickly. So we went from having a whole list of games coming up in the future to having very, very few. So the magazine, we carried on as long as we could. We tried to do, a decent job and produce something that we hope people would like. But obviously, it was always a time limit on it. So I left. I went to live in Spain for a while. Came back. Went freelance. And I was freelance for a lot of years. Worked on a whole load of magazines. I mean, I think I worked on pretty much every magazine that Future had at one point or another. So I worked on official PlayStation magazine for a lot of years. I was a regular, sort of 2 weeks every month.
How did that go down? Did that go down well with the PlayStation sort of fraternity? There's this ex-editor of a SEGA magazine sort of arriving and writing about PlayStation games.
I think they was all right, actually. I think. I mean, because when we were first on SEGA Power, I mean, we used to do freelance for Total, Superplay, and these guys from Total would come and write for us. And generally, there was a kind of, and I think it's true to that. There's always the playground arguments, but I think generally, when it boils down to it, we're all in the same boat. We all like the same things. So I think generally, people are a lot more tolerant. And also nowadays as well, people tend to have more than one console. I mean, whatever you've got, you've usually got a Switch as well somewhere lurking in the background. So, but yeah, people are okay. And then I did some sort of more serious publishing for a while. Then I did my own thing for a bit, and I launched a local magazine in Somerset, like a community magazine. And then the pandemic hit, and then it came back, and I got together and decided to do SEGA Powered.
Yeah, and SEGA Powered, obviously now going from strength to strength. We're coming up to issue 5. And that's the issue we're going to talk about a little bit more depth in a little while. Not so much the content of the magazine, but what's going to be mounted on the cover. Hint, hint. There was the final issue of Saturn Power, Dean. Was actually quite sort of sad with that introduction that you wrote as the editor. That it's all kind of ended. We're not getting a lot of support from Sega. The Saturn's kind of having a really bad time, and you signed off with this kind of really heartfelt kind of goodbye. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. And obviously now you've come back with SEGA Powered, and you alluded to that in your first editor's intro, which I thought was a really nice touch. There's been this massive gulf of you being an editor of a SEGA magazine from Saturn Power, and then 23 years later,
shockingly, I think it is.
It is. You pick up with that, and I just thought it was a really nice sort of continuation of your tenure as a magazine editor.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to ask though is, in that final sign-off, or rather editor's intro in Saturn Power magazine, you make reference to the official Sega Saturn magazine, and that they'll no doubt be sort of, singing in the aisles that that you've kind of gone under almost. Did you have any relationship with the official Sega Saturn magazine? And more to the point, Richard Ledbetter, the editor, who obviously now works for or runs Digital Foundry. Did you have any kind of relationship there at all?
No, not really. No,
Okay. That's that question answered then.
Well, I'll be completely honest. I mean, we always had this kind of running battle with Mean Machines when it was SEGA Power. But it was all very light-hearted. I mean, we would bump into each other at events, and we'd always kind of share a beer and have a laugh. Yeah. And they were pretty decent guys, and we appreciate. I mean, we'd always take the mickey at them in the mag, but ultimately, we really did like the mag. Official PlayStation, it was a little bit different. They weren't kind of quite so approachable.
Was that Official Saturn? Was it?
Sorry, Official Saturn mag. Yeah, they weren't quite so warm, should we say? So I don't know. It's a very different relationship, and I don't know Richard Ledbetter personally, but we've never kind of spoken really. He said a couple of things about the mag, that weren't particularly pleasant. So I guess he wasn't a fan, and that's fine. That's fine. That's not a problem.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, no. I just thought that was quite sort of telling, the inter-magazine rivalry, because you don't really get a lot of that, especially not now. You don't see websites having a pop at other websites, either in jest or like literally. So I think the sort of friendly rivalry that some of the magazines had back in the day was quite nice looking back on it. It's almost like we're all in this together kind of thing. We're all in the same industry. We all kind of know each other.
Yeah,
we'll have a little bit of a pop every now and then if we can get away with it, almost a bit tongue in cheek.
You just wanting the drama, Tom. You just wanting you want the drama.
To be fair, I am a bit of a drama queen. But
say it. But yeah, that's true.
Well, Paul on the mag spoke to Steve Merritt for our last issue and interviewed him. And I've seen a couple of other interviews with Steve Merritt fairly recently, and they've raised kind of the rivalry, because at the time there was quite a bit of, it seemed to be quite a bit of bitterness between Mean Machines and Digitizer.
Right.
But you talked to Steve, and he was like, "Oh God, I didn't realise. It was all kind of in jest. It was nothing ever serious." And then I think he kind of apologised to Paul from Digitizer. And I think there's always that kind of, you see something in print, you think, "Oh my God, they must really hate each other." But it's all very tongue in cheek, really. It's none of it's kind of should be taken to heart.
All kind of in jest. I suppose that a lot of the personalities that wrote in that period were quite similar as well. Quite sort of, the writing style was quite sort of jocular, wasn't it? Like, obviously you mentioned Digitizer, and you mentioned Mean Machine, Sega. I read all of those because I appreciated the humour, and in a way it's where my own writing style kind of was formulated from reading those magazines and absorbing all that, and almost kind of like an osmosis of this kind of writing style, and having a bit tongue in cheek and a bit playful. So yeah, it's really cool to hear that, really. And just mentioning Paul as well, he's a good friend of mine, and I know that he's basically a walking encyclopedia of magazines. It's cool to hear that I said to him recently, I said, you started with the Maximum Power Up podcast, interviewing all these games journalists and magazine writers, and you've finally gone full circle and become the tutor has become the master or whatever. He's now writing for a magazine, so he's now doing what he interviewed people that did that job in the past. So it's pretty cool. Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Ian, that potted history. I know I hate talking about myself, so I don't know if you feel the same, but I can't stand it. But I'm going to put Daniel on the spot now. Cool. Come forward. Your time is here, Daniel. So for the benefit of listeners who maybe didn't see our written interview that we published on the Dreamcast Junkyard blog a few months ago, likewise with Dean, could you give us a bit of a history of who you are, and obviously how Wave came to be and how you got into Dreamcast publishing? Yeah,
sure, absolutely. Well, our history doesn't go quite so far back, but if you want sort of the inspiration, we sort of started in about 2003 as gamers and that were very much interested in the indie scene, in particular the Dreamcast indie scene. So I guess right at the beginning.
Yeah, that's before even the Dreamcast Junkyard was a thing, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking sort of Feet of Fury, Beats of Rage, that sort of era.
Yeah.
And we started off just as big fans, but also as modders of the sort of the Beats of Rage engine. And we used to make our own games. We also used to help other people make their games. So we were pretty sort of well cemented in there.
Yeah.
Obviously, no one had a clue who we were at that time. We were just one of many faceless forum accounts, as it were. And then we've just, since then, every release that's come out for the Dreamcast, we've always thought, yeah, this is cool. Some better than others. And, long story short, a lot of time fast forwarded. And a couple of years ago, we said, you know what? A lot of these games are coming out and they're doing really well within the scene, but maybe it would be really cool for them to be seen by a wider audience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really kind of the logic behind us getting involved in the publishing side of things.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. I mean, just going back to what you mentioned there about being involved in the modding scene right at the sort of the beginning with things like Beats of Rage. It almost feels like it was a bit of a Wild West, certainly online, because it was you had sites like Dreamcast Scene, like forums like that, and obviously Dreamcast Talk, where people would just kind of, and it still happens now, where people will just put something out that they've created, and to very little fanfare. Some of the stuff is great. There's so many games that have kind of been lost to the annals of history, certainly on the Dreamcast. the way I see Wave is it's almost like, and this does, I hope this doesn't sound sort of flippant in any way, but you've kind of entered the scene and kind of gone and grabbed everything by the collar and gone, let's get all these under one sort of umbrella and put them out in a nice professional looking package that looks like it could literally be a contemporary Dreamcast release. Here we go with all the bells and whistles. It's not discs, CDRs with writing written on it. It's an actual printed thing with a manual and a proper kind of campaign around it. It's superb what you've done really for the Dreamcast scene, and I don't think I'm the only person who thinks that. I think a lot of people would echo what I've just said as well.
Thank you for noticing. I suppose it looks like we just came out of nowhere last year and sort of grabbed everything by the scruff of the neck and said, right, this is what's going on. And that's kind of fairly true, to be honest. We were thinking about it for a long time, though. We were very much planning our approach. We're looking at what other people were doing and sort of seeing what they were doing right and what they were doing from our perspective wrong. At the end of the day, we just said to ourselves, what would we do if we wanted these products for ourselves? And we just went in that direction, basically. I should say that we spent a lot of time before Wave as in distribution. So we already had like a pretty good relationship with a bunch of the independent sort of indie games shops within the UK. And what I noticed is that none of them, like literally zero of them, sold any indie releases for any console, like at all.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
And we were talking to each other sort of sometime in 2020 when everything was sort of locked down. And we said, why is that? Like, why did none of them sell these games? Because some of them are awesome, like seriously good games. And the only way to know about them is just to be following the Dreamcast Junkyard or whatever, awesome publications and a great way to get information out there. But if you think about the mainstream world, the guys that are not on Twitter or social media or any of this business, they're just going into the game shops, scrolling through, looking for games that they played when they were kids, basically. And that to me seems like the ideal audience for this stuff.
Yeah, and an untapped resource as well for getting people into this scene, not just the Dreamcast, but into like maybe other consoles which have indie scenes as well. I don't think there is another console that has such a big indie scene as the Dreamcast, but that's a different topic.
No, maybe the NES, but that's the other side of things.
I remember when Intrepid Izzy was released, and you made a conscious effort to get it into brick and mortar stores, and it was like the first new Dreamcast game in actual shops. This is quite a big deal. I mean, I remember that I saw a lot of that on social media, and that was really quite a cool thing to do. And seeing it on shelves was just almost like, what have I fallen asleep and woken up back in sort of 1999 again? That was excellent. Yeah,
I remember talking to you, Daniel, about this, and you didn't you do like a roadshow of basically every independent store in the UK in order to make that happen?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think we got a little bit carried away, to be honest, but I don't regret any second of it. We basically just made a list of every indie game shop that there was in the UK.
Well, literally every single one? Every single one.
Wow. And we thought, oh, wow, there's a lot more than we expected. Because in our hometown, there's zero. And in the city that we're in now, there's two. So, not huge numbers compared to what there would have been maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So we thought, there's probably about 50 of them in the country. And it turns out there's about 120.
So what did you do? Did you load the car up and then go on a road trip kind of thing?
Yeah, that's literally it. We just put 500 copies of Intrepid Izzy in the back of the car, and we just literally went to every single one by one, sort of 3 or 4 a day.
That's excellent.
And then that was a very, very costly and time intensive process, but we had a really good time. It was something that I personally wanted to do anyway, just to kind of like the traditional road trip across America, but of indie shops in the UK.
Where was the furthest one? Which was the most far-flung?
Furthest away, there was one in northeast Scotland. I can't remember the exact town name, but it was a pretty long way away. And they were closed when we got there.
Oh, well, I was kind of hoping you'd say it was this like really remote retro gaming shop on the side of a mountain in like the north of Scotland. It's close enough.
It pretty much was, but yeah, they were closed because obviously last year it was sort of still touch and go with what was going on in the world, and a bunch of them ended up being closed. So we had to come back to them essentially at a later date.
Yeah,
I think that one actually ended up permanently closing. We saw it on their Google listing.
Oh, no.
So we never actually went back there. But other than that, we've been to all of them, as far as we know.
Yeah, there used to be two in. So I live in Southampton. There used to be two in Southampton that I know of. But I think one of them closed, so we've only got one now, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, similar in Brighton. I think there used to be one up on London Road, and that closed a couple of years back. And I think there's just one in the market now, which I know you've been to, Daniel. Beko Neko, is that the one? Neko Beko?
Yeah, Beko Neko, yeah.
Beko
That's
Neko.
the one.
I can't remember how to pronounce it, but I've seen it. Yeah, there's very it's all CEX or sex as they prefer to be called, and game.
Really? Is that how they pronounce it themselves?
They
sex?
do, yeah. Pronounce it sex.
Oh.
Yeah. And game, which are now nearly all in Sports Directs, which is bizarre.
Pretty odd.
Wait a minute. Game is inside Sports Direct?
A lot of them are, yeah. Now.
Yeah.
Are they?
Yeah.
That's weird.
It's very old.
Yeah, they don't even have their own staff anymore. It's just Sports Direct staff.
Mm-hmm.
So you're standing around for about 5 hours waiting for somebody to show up then? Is that
Pretty much.
when you try and buy a pair of trainers, you have to grab somebody. Excuse me. Now, Daniel, you've published a load of games now on the Dreamcast. Obviously, we've mentioned Intrepid AZ, there's Yore, BBIS 2, Flea, Rush Rally Reloaded, and of course, the latest big release was Postal. The port from the PC that was done by Dan Redfield, which is an amazing port. We did a review on the Dreamcast Junkyard. Check that out. I'll put it in the show notes if you've not read it. But we've also got Shadow Gangs coming in the near future.
Yeah.
This is going to sound like a really sort of open-ended, weird question, but what do you think's driving this renaissance of the Dreamcast? Why sort of in the last few years has it just suddenly got really popular, and why are all these new games coming out? I don't expect you to give me a definitive answer, but what, in your opinion, is causing this?
This is probably a real stab in the dark, but I suspect it's a similar reason to why we got involved.
Right.
And that's that it's just a matter of aging into it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm personally, I'm 32. So if you can imagine, when the Dreamcast came out, I was like 10, 11 years old. Perfect age to be really obsessed with that system. And it's just a case of, you always dream of being able to publish games or make games or be involved in the industry in some way. And it's an issue of timing, really, isn't it? You can't really do that when you're 10, 11, 12, 13, whatever.
Yeah.
And you end up in the workforce working for other people, whatnot. And then one day a pandemic hits.
And the rest is history.
Yeah, you start thinking about your childhood and sort of what you wanted to do when you was a kid. And yeah, exactly. Like you said, the rest is history.
That sounds exactly like how I got involved in the whole Dreamcast scene myself. You have to reassess everything, don't you? But make me, anytime anybody is younger than me, I now feel like super old, like 32. My goodness, Daniel.
Yeah,
Whippersnapper.
Yeah.
You're all children compared to me, I promise you.
The wise old man in the corner stroking his beard.
Literally. You whippersnappers, you don't know anything.
Yeah.
And so that brings us nicely, really, on to the kind of the merging of your two sort of. It's going to sound really like artsy and wanky, this, but the merging of your destinies. SEGA Powered and Wave Game Studios have kind of come together for issue 5 of the magazine to put a cover-mounted demo disc on for the Dreamcast, which is obviously very exciting for us in the Dreamcast community, the Dreamcast scene. We've not seen anything like this since the actual, inverted commas, official magazines disappeared back in the day. Dean, when the Dreamcast was contemporary, was there ever any, yearning from you to want to get back into the magazine scene of writing about Dreamcast? Because Sega Saturn Power folded before the Dreamcast launched. So did you ever look at it a little bit side-eyed and go, oh, I could get back involved in that if I send the right emails to the right people?
Well, basically, Future launched DC UK, and I was kind of pretty out of it by then. I wasn't working for the company. I was working for them and others. So as soon as I saw DC UK, I thought, well, that's about as good gaming magazine as you're going to get, and there's nothing. I don't think I could have done anything better. So I worked for them quite a bit. I did regular freelance for them, and I was quite happy to do that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was about as far as it went. I mean, obviously, if they got in contact with me and said, we're launching a DC magazine, would you like to be involved? And I would have jumped at it. But they had Keith Stewart, and obviously Neil, who's working with us now. So they had a pretty damn good team as it was. So they didn't really need anyone else. They had it sorted.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and of course we had Casper Field on the podcast a few episodes back, and he was really nice. And he spoke about the trials and tribulations of getting that magazine sort of off the ground and all the different kinds of features that they did. So yeah, it's really cool to speak to someone like yourself and all these names from the past that I remember from when I was growing up, really. Oh yeah,
Casper's lovely, yeah.
Really nice guy, yeah. And Andrew did a great interview with him. Well, I was on it. I was just kind of sort of in the background. But so yeah, let's talk about this coming together of Wave and SEGA Powered. So who kind of approached who then? Whose idea was it? If you can talk about that.
I think if I remember rightly, Daniel, it's kind of a joint thing, really, wasn't it? It was when we started SEGA Powered. There were two things I wanted to do in its lifetime. One of them was get Will Overton on the cover, and the other one was to do a demo disc. And I wasn't quite sure how that was going to happen, but I just thought, how cool would it be to kind of do that? And also, probably on another level, it's kind of exercising the ghosts of Saturn Power. To be able to put another disc on the cover would kind of help ease some of that pain. And it was only kind of when we sort of got to know Daniel a bit more and what was happening with Wave, and then when they announced they were doing this kind of 12 months of Dreamcast, so they were going to aim to release a Dreamcast game every month for the whole of 2022, and I thought, well, that sounds like an opportunity for a demo disc there. So that's when we started talking, really, and it was kind of, that went on for probably 2 or 3 months until we eventually got it sorted. Is that kind of right, Daniel? Have I missed anything out? Or
that sounds about right. It was very organic. I couldn't really ever pinpoint a particular time when we said, let's do this. It kind of just evolved over time, didn't it?
Yeah, it was the start of the year, I think we initially talked about it, but obviously we had to have that kind of library of games to be able to do it, because it's, as Daniel said to me a number of times, you have to get, because a lot of these people are doing these games in their spare time, the amount of effort it takes to then produce a demo is quite time consuming, so you have to have enough games in the back catalogue to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of nostalgia for demo discs. Certainly not just with the Dreamcast, with the PlayStation, with those the PlayStation demos from the magazines. For me, the Dream On demo discs, a part and parcel of owning a Dreamcast. That was for the first sort of week or so that I had my Dreamcast. I didn't have any games. It was just that demo disc that came with it. So it's really cool that you've managed to come together and do this. And a couple of questions for you, really, Daniel. The demos on the disc, are they all Wave releases? Is that right?
3 of them definitely are.
Okay. If you're not allowed to say, that's fine. We won't go any further on that.
I mean, I'm pretty sure we've gone public with which games are going to be on the disc.
Yeah, it's all officially announced. We did it in the next month page on the last issue, so it's all open.
They're pretty good, and one of them was a particularly good get, I think. So I think people will be very pleased.
Do you want to spill the beans?
Sure. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. We've got Shadow Gangs. We've got Intrepid Izzy. It's a brand new demo that's been made especially for this disc.
Oh, wow.
So it's completely different from the Kickstarter demo.
Nice.
Which is the one I think a lot of people may have played, although everyone seems to have played the game now at this point. We've got Flea, and we've got Driving Strikers.
Ooh, very cool.
Is that like a special build for the disc?
It is, yeah. I don't think it's available publicly anywhere.
No, I don't think it is. No.
I believe there's some members of the Dreamcast community have been involved in the sort of programming side of the disc.
That's right.
Specifically, a guy called Ian Michael is involved quite heavily.
100% correct.
Yeah, I'd just like to give people a shout out because I know certain people listen to this pod, and it's great to give mentions where they can. And it also basically brings it all back to the fact that it is a big community, the Dreamcast community, and people like to get involved where they can and lend their skills to certain projects. And it's just when I heard that he was involved, I was like, course he is. He's a legend when it comes to this kind of thing. So that's really great that you've managed to get people like him involved. Of course, yeah, it's brilliant.
Absolutely, and I would say we probably couldn't have done it without him. He's pretty great at what he does. So it's an honour that he was very, very willing to help us out with the goal of really just promoting the indie scene a little bit wider.
There's a little part of me that was hoping that it was going to be called Dream On, and then the next number after the one that never came out. So, and it have the same kind of visual style and everything. That would have been like, oh man, this is not that there's anything negative about this in any way, shape, or form. But if that had been also been involved, that would have been the icing on the cake, I think. But is this the way that you mean to go on with the magazine, Dean? Is this going to be like a one-off, or do you think it'll happen again in the future?
I hope so. I mean, that's all I can really say, to be honest, because it's depends on so many things. But and it depends on how it's received. I know everyone's kind of excited about it, but there is a financial commitment to something like this. So as long as we can all cover costs and in that respect, we're not looking to make a load of money from it, but as long as we can cover the investment we put into it, then and the titles there in the future, then I'm sure Daniel will be more than up to doing it again, hopefully, anyway.
Definitely.
Well, I will certainly be buying a copy, because obviously it's a Dreamcast, and of course the magazine is fantastic.
There you go.
Amazing magazine.
So yeah, I love it kind of does. It does mimic the SEGA Power that I know and love. I've got two issues of SEGA Power here on the floor by my feet, actually. One with the Last Action Hero on the cover.
Oh yeah,
and the other's got Ground Zero Texas on the cover. So the less we say about that, the better. But the magazine obviously is superb. Okay, let's move on just to sort of our last topic, really, and that is really how we see the future of the indie scene going on the Dreamcast, and maybe just even the wider sort of Sega scene. Really, Sega's just super popular at the moment. Not really for anything that they as a company have done, but the fact that there's so much nostalgia for systems like the Mega Drive, the Saturn, and the Dreamcast. A bit of an open-ended question, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Do you think that we'll ever see the Saturn get or garner an indie scene as big as the Dreamcast, or is it sort of limited by the coding of the hardware, if that makes sense?
I think that's exactly it. I think the fact that it's easier to develop on the Dreamcast is a big thing. There is an annual, I can't remember the name of it, I should have looked at it beforehand. There's a gaming competition, isn't there, where they produce a whole range of Saturn developed sort of games and applications and stuff like that as a natural competition and online.
Was it like a game jam type thing?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but I stumbled across it fairly recently. I think it's something to do with Shiro. Shiro kind of linked to it.
Okay, that's interesting.
And it's an American thing, and basically people submit their own games or anything that they've created on the Saturn, and it's judged by an actual official team and everything. I suspect it's something like the Dreamcast is always going to be popular in the regard of the fact that it's easier to produce things for, really. I personally think, anyway.
Yeah. As soon as you ask people to start modifying their systems in order to play certain titles, that's when their interest sort of switches off.
Yeah.
Like, that's far too much work. That's why the Dreamcast seems to work.
Yeah, and just going back to things like Postal to come into the Dreamcast, as Dean alluded to there, the fact that it's quite an easy system to I say easy, again, inverted commas, I'm not a programmer, I always have to say that, I have to give that qualification.
Easier, perhaps.
Yes, so what I would like to see in an ideal world, shall we say, would be for other games from around the era of Postal to be ported to the Dreamcast. That would be amazing,
Yeah.
Things like, maybe games that we never got that were hinted. So things like System Shock, that would be amazing. Obviously things like Kingpin, which were rumoured to be coming to the Dreamcast, if that could be somehow ported by a fan. Obviously, this is completely wishful thinking. I don't expect someone to just go out and do this because I've said it on a podcast, but it's that kind of thing that really excites me when it comes to the Dreamcast and where we are maybe in 2 or 3 years' time. What could have materialised out of the community onto our Dreamcast? It's a really interesting and exciting time. And obviously, Daniel, you with Wave, you're in sort of in the driving seat, as it were, to sort of, if any of these games do come to fruition, to publish them for the community. So
yeah, exactly. Our eyes are always very much open. We're open to all sorts of interesting ideas, and if we don't get to it, then someone else will. There's plenty of us in the scene now, and lots of interest, and crucially, lots of skilled people that have got the will to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, I take you don't see yourselves as the sort of the Electronic Arts of the Dreamcast scene, sort of taking over everything and just like.
No, I don't think that's good for anybody.
No, because I mean, obviously there are other publishers. There's people like Pixel Heart who've put stuff out, and then obviously there's the guys from Retro Summers who self-published. I think was there a re-release of Xenocider in the offing as well through Wave?
Yeah, the re-release was through Wave. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, cool. Okay, we're going to get issue 5 of SEGA Powered. Is it when does issue 5 come out, Dean?
It's going to be early July. So the first week, I'm keeping everything crossed on the first week of July. We are a small team, so we desperately try and get them out as quickly as possible. But we ask people to be a tiny bit patient because we are working towards being a monthly release, and that's kind of something we're looking to do from 6 onwards. But at the moment, it's kind of slightly above that.
Yeah,
so.
that's fair enough. Any hints as to what might be on the cover of 5?
Well, absolutely. Well, basically, we're going big on the Dreamcast for number 5. So we thought with the disc and everything else, we thought we're gonna really kind of, it's a whole love letter to the console. So we got a nice. We started doing these bigger cover features, sort of with Shenmue and with Panzer Dragoon. So it's going to be a large feature broken up into elements, talking about the Dreamcast, as you know, Andrew, because I think obviously you're very kindly being involved with that. And we're going to be doing some nice reviews of sort of classic Dreamcast games. So yeah, it's all kind of and Dominic Diamond. We've got Dominic Diamond in this issue. He's starting a column from issue 5 onwards, which I'm really excited about. So we did he contacted us a little while ago, and we did the interview with him for the last issue. And I just said to him, "Do you fancy doing a column?" and he was like, because he's basically started doing this thing for The Guardian, and he said he's loving writing again. He really adores it. So any excuse he's got to write anything about games, he's up for it. And he's a really good writer. He's funny. So he was a really natural fit for us. So I'm really pleased we got him on board.
That's brilliant. Yeah. And one of the guys who does this podcast with us, Rich, he's got his own podcast. And he interviewed Dominic Diamond recently, and it's just a really great down-to-earth chat. And he's just such a funny guy, Dominic Diamond, and Rich, obviously.
He really is,
it was great, and it's great to hear that he's going to be writing a regular column in SEGA Powered. So yeah, that's awesome. And so SEGA Powered can obviously be found at segapowered.com. And there's a shop there. You can buy all the back issues, well, the ones that are still in stock. Issue 1, which I've got here, is sold out now, but you can still get it digitally, can't you?
You can get all the issues digitally. We reprinted issue 1 twice, but we kind of tend to do it in smaller numbers because obviously when anything under sort of 400 or 500, it tends to be pricey. So we do as many as we can afford to do, and then they tend to go, within a couple of days. So we'll hopefully be doing another one because we're running low on 2 and 3 as well now. So I think we're going to have to kind of shell out a bit of cash and get a bit more of a back issue thing going on. But at the moment, there are still issued copies of issue 2 and 3, but not for long, I don't think.
So yeah, you heard it here first. Dreamcast episode extravaganza, just like Lock On, coming to Sega Powered. That will be purchased by me on the day it is released. So yeah, superb. And obviously Wave Game Studios can be found online at wavegamestudios.com. And that's obviously, you've also got a store on there. You can find out all the news about upcoming games and currently available titles. And I have to say, it's a really good looking website. You've got that video of Intrepid Izzy and Rush Rally Reloaded just playing as you start up the website.
We need to add some more to that.
Great logo as well. I don't know why, but the logo for Wave just instantly reminds me of the Dreamcast era. I know the blue and stuff, but the logo itself is so good.
Yeah, we just sort of said, what can we do that looks rad in 2000s? And that's kind of the logic behind it, really.
How do you do, fellow kids? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
maybe not. Maybe that's a bit insulting, actually, but wasn't intended that way. But it's been really great to speak to you guys. And obviously, like I say, it's really exciting what you're doing with the magazine and with the game releases. And long may it continue. Really, that is really all I can say.
Fingers crossed.
All it remains for me to say is, where can people find you? Obviously, we've talked about your website, so where can people find you on social media, Dean?
Well, we're on Twitter and Facebook, mostly Twitter, to be honest. We've also got a Discord page, so if you want to kind of come along into the Discord and just chat and ask us anything, then there's usually one of us on there. So
we'll put all the links anyway in the show notes, so people won't be able to miss them because we'll just bombard them. And again, with yourself, Daniel, where can you be found?
Same as Sega Powered. We're primarily on Twitter. That's where conversation seems to flow. We're just under Wave Game Studios, but we're also on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all the other whatever the kids are looking at these days.
Amazing. Is it the TikToks of you playing Dreamcast games? That's what I'm imagining.
It's mostly just videos from where we've exhibited the games at certain events.
Oh, okay.
Can I make one really niche request, actually?
You certainly can.
If anyone's listening from a city called St Albans in Hertfordshire and they remember a game shop which was called Games Unlimited, if they could just say hi, because I've been trying to find anybody in the whole world for about the last 10 years who remembers that shop. So if anyone happens on the super unlikely scenario that anyone does remember that shop, get in touch with us and we'll reminisce about those good old days.
Is that somewhere you used to visit as a youngster then, is it?
All the time, several times a week.
Yeah.
And then it just disappeared one day.
It's always the way. Me and Paul from SEGA Powered, we often reminisce about a game shop in a town that we both used to live in when we were kids, called Intergames. And I used to swap Saturn games in there and Mega Drive games, and then it just disappeared.
Yeah, there are these kind of shops everywhere, like in Lincoln, where I actually got my first Dreamcast from. I think it was called Phoenix Games, and Jason, who I believe helped you download with the postal stuff. He's from Lincoln also. He also works on Lock On. He's from Lincoln and he remembers Phoenix Games, and we're like the only two people who remember Phoenix Games, and it's long gone. But yeah, amazing.
Yeah, never got to say goodbye. They just disappeared.
Well, maybe with that appeal, we can sort of get somebody, almost like in sort of a telethon style way to maybe call in or
you never know.
They can call in, but there's nobody going to answering the phone. But anyway. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
No worries, thank you.
Like I say, hopefully both Wave and SEGA Powered continue for many, many years to come. I certainly will be a customer of both for many years to come.
Absolutely.
But that's it for this episode. We can be found as the Dreamcast Junkyard on Twitter at the DC Junkyard. You can find our blog at thedreamcastjunkyard.co.uk. You can also buy us a coffee if you so wish. It's buyusacoffee.the Dreamcast Junkyard or something like that. You'll find us if you just put Junkyard or Dreamcast into Google. And that will do it for this episode. We'll return in the near future with, more inanity, not that there's any inanity on this podcast, just hasten to add that, more guests and more stuff from the booming Dreamcast community. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.
Please stop this disc now.
Oh, and a shout out to Nick from Wave as well. Hi.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
I'll put that at the end after the credits. That's a sort of a bonus bit.